connection. I'm Mira Rubin, and today's topic is nonlinearity. We tend to believe that life progresses in a linear fashion, that um, in that respect, it's somewhat predictable and we gain comfort from that. But what if things aren't really linear? And so it should be a fun conversation, exploration. And before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Sue. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you joining us this morning. And welcome to everybody else who's with us. We're talking about nonlinearity today. So when we tend to think that life progresses in a linear fashion and that our progress occurs in a linear fashion. So, our personal development, for example, we tend to imagine that where we deal with something and it's done, and then we move to the next thing and we deal with that and it's done, and then the next thing. But I think most of us have experienced that we work on something and it seems that we reach a high resolution around it. And then at some point it comes back. And rather than linear progression, oftentimes we perceive that return of an issue as, oh my gosh, here it is again, and nothing is changing. When in fact, we're talking about a cyclical or a spiral progression. And that spiral progression has us revisit themes of our lives oftentimes, but from a different vantage point, from a different frequency, from a different orientation. And so it's a non-linear progression. Along with this idea is where we can be moving towards something. All these things are happening all at once. And at some point, we recognize, oh my gosh, there are all these synchronicities or all these interrelationships of things that seemed very divergent that end up converging to serve an objective that we've held or an intention that we've held in a way that was not in any way predictable. Where, for instance, you might be at an event and you meet someone at that event, and then You have an idea and then you meet somebody else and that person knows the person that you met at the other event, and there's a convergence of ideas and uh, possibilities and opportunities that was completely unpredictable, that was completely nonlinear. So Sue says we work on our issues and are surprised when we circle back and revisit something from a different vantage point. We're surprised that we often, thank you for reiterating that, we often perceive that, oh my gosh, it's the same thing, but in fact it is from a different vantage point. In fact, there is greater insight and a greater dimension of understanding. And I think what so many of us can recognize as we revisit these themes is that there's a shifting of maybe intensity, even around trauma, that when we, as we move through and evolve and dissolve more and more of our issues as we grow, that we may be revisiting something, but it's a different experience. I think it serves us to recognize that it's a different experience. So yes, thank you, Sue, to help remind me to ask people to like and share that, which would be great. Build our community here, build the conversation. So I'm going to give an example that I think is really interesting. I haven't thought of this for a while, but when we're talking about nonlinearity. So years ago, I was on a dating site and or a dating app, which it was not the best experience for me overall, but I did meet this one interesting person, and we became friends. It wasn't a match, but we became friends, and he ended up introducing me to his ex-wife, who was very involved in biofeedback, and it was very quantum biofeedback. It was very, very interesting and fascinating for me. And we had a really rich friendship for several years. And so here's the nonlinearity. I met him maybe to meet her, which opened up all kinds of arenas, which created the foundation for other connections that have led me into greater expression of myself and my purpose. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of nonlinearity. If you can trace some of these connections and histories, you'll notice, oh my gosh, this led to that, led to this, led to that, but in a very convoluted way over periods of time that branched out to make these almost mycelial like connections uh, of of a vitalized life tapestry that is not from point A to point B. These convolutions and interweavings that happen in such a fascinating way. And I'm seeing that in the connections that are evolving in my ecosystem between people, discovering that people I know people I know, and uh, the world sort of becoming smaller in so many ways and more interwoven, more connected. And I wonder, is that something that you experience in your life? If you look at how you have arrived to where you've arrived, and who's connecting who to what, and what kinds of opportunities are emerging as a result of those connections. I just find it so fascinating. And what's coming to mind right now too is the notion of relationships. So, what is it? A moment, of something in a lifetime. That we meet people and we have these different levels of connection. So a reason, a season, a lifetime. Maybe is that how it goes? But we move through life in this dance of interconnection that's not just from point A to point B. And it's interesting because I have done a bunch of different things in my life, and I imagine it's likely that you have as well. And it seems maybe at times that we've made left turns or right turns where, that it looks like it's taken us off course, but then it turns out that these what looked like sidebar kinds of experiences become really essential and important in the other things that we end up doing. So I have seen this for myself where my different pursuits, for instance, in graphic design, in writing, in business, in healing, are all converging to provide me with the foundational skills I need to be doing the things that I'm doing now, and also creating a broader foundation for the emergence of whatever is coming next, and the possibilities. Like we're synthesizing beings. We synthesize our experience, and we can take that synthesis and allow that to be the emergence of something new. Each of us is an amalgamation of our unique experience, and we can take that experience into all different avenues in our own emergence and our own expression. So Shosha, welcome. So good to have you here with us. Shosha says, late arrival with love for your work and care. You're so kind, and it's just wonderful to have you here whenever you arrive. Any of you that are joining us. So we're talking about how our emergence and our evolution is not linear. You might know the phrase one step forward, two steps back. It could be one step forward, two steps sideways too. That it looks like we're kind of moving in different directions, but it all contributes to our synthesis. So Sue says, trying to move through the world with awareness. How does one approach a situation or conflict and stay centered? Wow, that's such a great question, Sue. So I think the first step in that kind of situation, like when we're in a conflict, how do we stay centered? The first gift of awareness is to recognize that we're starting to get off centered, that we're starting to move into reactivity. Because without that awareness, it's just like a freight train and we get taken over and kind of operate robotically, in reactivity and out of a past program. So the first step in the process of remaining centered is awareness, and to recognize that there's something going on rather than getting swept into it. And as we come into that awareness that we're starting to become reactive, then we can take action. One action is to breathe, to presence ourselves, to bring ourselves back. Another action is to communicate, to say, you know what, I notice that I'm getting a bit reactive. Can we just sort of take a breath together? Or to say, hey, let's, I, maybe we can um, clarify what our intentions are in this communication. The idea here is, how do we stay centered? So one of the ways, obviously, is to be aware of what's going on for ourselves. Another way is to maybe announce our state, and it may or may not be appropriate to do that in a given environment, but to say, I notice I'm getting a little reactive. I just want to take a beat here, if that's okay. Or to find a way to connect more deeply with that person rather than getting into the reactivity if you're really triggered. And if you're really triggered, sometimes it's appropriate to say, you know what? I'm happy to have this conversation with you, and I just need a little bit of space right now. Can we come back to this? So there's a multitude of ways to manage this. It's obviously going to be situation specific, but the first thing is awareness and reconnecting with our agency and our choice to choose how we respond and how we interact with something. Some conflicts, it's good to walk away. Some can be diffused. Some are just a matter of our own perception, and we can switch that by becoming more present. Because typically, when we get reactive, what's happening is we're thrown back into a past experience and we're acting out of that past, out of the trauma of that time, rather than being in the present moment. So, those hopefully, does that provide some context or answer for you? So Sue is reiterating, notice that we're starting to get off center, recognize there's something going on and we might be reactive. Breathe, communicate, clarify your intentions. You might say, I'm happy to have this conversation, but I notice I'm getting a bit reactive. Connect with the person on a deeper level. So Sue says, I react to the energy they put out and have to slow down. That's another thing, too, is slowing down. That's brilliant. And another thing, for so many of us, we are very empathic and we get very impacted by other people's energy. And a lot of that empathy, that empathic capacity comes from, in many cases, having to be hypervigilant as children, to be really aware of everything that's going on because there's a danger in the environment, maybe a volatile parent. And so we become really, really vigilant, and we're receiving all the information around us. So one of the things that I find incredibly powerful, and I've been reminded of lately, is to be able to consolidate our own energy. This is part of becoming centered. And this is a really wonderful practice. And you can't necessarily do it in the midst of conflict. You might be able to, but to rub your hand from your forehead to the nape of your neck and either verbally aloud or to yourself, say, I am me and only me, meaning my energy is mine and I'm not, I'm releasing the energy of someone else. In other words, I'm reinforcing my own energy, strengthening my own energy field. I'm me and only me. And this is so powerful because if you try it, at least for me, every time I do it, I notice I get chills. It's just like I come back to myself. And it's such a simple thing to do. So Shosha said, yes, negative neural mirroring is an issue for me around loved ones. So this might be a really good tool for you, Shosha, is I'm me and only me. And I find it really powerful to say, my energy is mine, and I don't have to be that permeable to other people's energies. So when my energy is coherent, when my energy is coherent, then I can deal more effectively with other people. I can allow somebody to be upset without taking on the upset. So I can say, oh, wow, I see you're upset. Can you help me understand what's happening for you? So that's an option also, is to communicate in that way. Or did I say something that upset you? And that's sort of a tricky statement because I may have said something to which you got upset. The upset that you got upset about, that's you, right? And I can recognize that maybe I said something that was triggering, or I might have said something that was aggressive, or and so there it's two parts of a communication. And when we're centered, we don't have to be, we're not as reactive, right? So we could also just say, hey, I see it looks like you're upset. Can you help me understand what's going on for you? When we're centered, we have a greater ability to have that kind of communication because we're not being the sponge, having that mirroring. I never heard that term before, Shosha, so thank you for that. But that's a powerful thing to be able to do. And it means bringing ourselves back into coherence. So a lot of people talk about protection, and my belief, and I'm not saying it's true, it's my hypothesis. I hold my beliefs with open hand, but my working hypothesis is that rather than protection, what we do is create greater coherence and greater strength. And that is just by its nature a protection. The idea of protection is threat, like that there's all this threat that we have to protect ourselves from. And I'm not really into affirming the threat. I'm really more into affirming the coherence. And on the way to the coherence, maybe protection is necessary for some folks. I can get that because there's this permeability, but let's work to create a greater coherence. And that way we have and are able to maintain our agency and our clarity and our centeredness. So we were talking about nonlinearity, and this conversation is a great example of that, right? Because we're going into all different directions. The idea here is to be able to synthesize our different experiences and to recognize that it's all the experience is feeding us. And has the potential to enrich us, even the experiences which we perceive with a negative interpretation. That sometimes our challenges in life are our greatest teachers. So it may seem like we're making a left turn, or we're going sideways, or that we're off track, but oftentimes those sidebars become really significant and useful in our growth. Like the sidebars from today, we're looking at how we can integrate and better benefit from the twists and turns that life presents. And it comes back to this other practice that I deeply value and recommend, invite you to try on. And that is, life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. And I say it's a practice because if we use that as the lens through which we experience life, it shifts our experience. So when we're having a really tough day, when we're going through really tough emotions, when we're experiencing tragedy, even, when we view life through that lens, that it's happening for us and through us rather than to us, we can allow ourselves to be in the experience more deeply. At least I find that to be the case. In other words, I release my resistance and I allow myself to flow more with the flow of life. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, I'm so grateful to you for the opportunity to share these morning musings and to expand our mutual experience. So until next